Yeah, and thanks for those of you that are sticking around, and for those of you that watch this later. With us is Ryan West and Stephanie Callahan from Iowa Workforce Development. I'm going to give them a little bit of time just to kind of give people an overview as to what they're seeing at Iowa Workforce Development, and changes that they're trying to implement, and they would ask you to be patient with, I think. Um, and ultimately, the biggest questions that I talked to Ryan about late last week came out of our helpline discussions, the individual one-on-one nonprofits, with the main focus being on with the new changes in the CARES Act related to kind of gig economy employees. How does this new PUA that I'll let Ryan and Stephanie kind of, how does that impact folks working with people that are 1099 or contract employers? And the other big question that we're seeing as well is with the federal government's CARES Act also talking about reimbursement for nonprofits. What kind of structure can people anticipate, and how would that actually impact budgeting and things that they should consider? So Ryan and Stephanie, the floor is yours. I'll likely ping you, but feel on some questions, but feel free to kind of give us an overview of what you're seeing and things that people should consider.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. Stephanie, I'll go first, so just jump in over me wherever you want. Nice to see everybody on here. I see a lot of familiar names. I hope everybody's doing well through this. One thing right off the bat, Suzanne H., if you did not get your final question answered, will you just go ahead and email me? I had forwarded yours on, so since I seen you on here, I wanted to bug you. Welcome. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Dustin, for inviting us. Couple of things. So there's been a lot of guidance and stuff coming down the pike for unemployment insurance purposes, excuse me. And in a nutshell, I think I'll cover the PUA as David or as Dustin laid out. So PUA basically is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, and we are heavy on acronyms, so I apologize to everybody. That's what we do here in the unemployment insurance world. But PUA is basically designed for individuals who don't have wages and won't qualify under normal circumstances. So for those of you who don't know, when you file a claim, the system is going to go back and look 18 months. And over those 18 months, it's going to look at all the employers you've worked for, and it's going to try to determine if you've earned enough wages to qualify for a normal unemployment insurance claim. You have to have at least 2 quarters of wages. One of those quarters has to be about $1,700. The other one has to be about $900, give or take. And if you have that, it's going to qualify you for a normal unemployment insurance claim. Now, the unemployment weekly benefit that you make or that you get based on those amounts will be low. You qualify for, I think that the minimum amount is $87. So in the situation that we're talking about here with your group, most of these individuals are or yourselves are going to qualify under that PUA bucket. Now, what we've noticed a lot lately, or what I've seen a lot lately, is we have a lot of people who are not only have a small business on the side, but they also have reported wages on the other side. So they're doing 2 different things. When you go to file a claim, you may qualify under the normal way because which is what they're going to go to first. And so that way may not necessarily be as much as what you get through your self-employed route with 1099 or your W-2s, but the system is set up that it's going to read those covered wages first. So just an FYI on that. Last week, we started to pay out the PUA claims. It took us some time to get everything set up. I think we're still one of a handful of states that are actually paying PUA. So we're in a good spot, all things considered. Each day now, we're seeing these come through, and more individuals are starting to get paid in this bucket. And so we had thousands of applications. We had thousands more come in over the weekend. But we have a huge group that is working these specifically to go through each one. We have to go through each one manually to pay them out, to get them all the information we need. And when we need to reach out to somebody, we're doing that via email or strictly phone call. So PUA is really, in a nutshell, designed for those folks who won't qualify under normal circumstances. It's up to 39 weeks, and you will qualify for the FPUC, Again, I don't want to let anybody down with acronyms. The FPUC is the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation. That's essentially the $600. Okay, so you get that on top of it. Now, one thing to remember, this really has nothing to do with the stimulus money of, $1,200, I believe. So there are scenarios where somebody may get a $1,200 deposit, their unemployment insurance deposit, and the $600 deposit all on the same day, just through kind of dumb luck on when you may have filed your claim. So those are kind of on the claimant side. On the actual charging side, we're looking further out. There's some things that they're going to benefit nonprofits, but where we are right now, if you watched the governor's press conference with Director Townsend, I believe it was either last week or the week before. Forgive me, they're all kind of running together now. We've set up a trigger. So when the unemployment insurance trust fund gets around, I believe we said $950 million, when it starts to drop to that amount, then a trigger will go into place and employers will then be charged for benefits moving forward. Right now, employers are not charged. So I know, in the nonprofit world, you guys are charged different. You're reimbursable employers, so it's just a dollar for dollar. I think we have about 3,000 of those, 2,500 to 3,000 of those employers in the state. Those are typically schools, government entities, nonprofits, et cetera. The bulk of them, though, there's about 80,000 employers in the state. So 77,000, those are contributory, and they play a percentage based on a tax every quarter. Okay, so those are how the two different buckets are set up. So they kind of roll to their own rules. And on the reimbursable, I know it's been a little confusing, or emergency, or nonprofit organizations, government entities. Let me read you some of the guidance that came down. It's just a real quick paragraph, and Stephanie, jump in here if I'm off on any of this. But basically, it also provides for transfer to a state's account in the unemployment trust fund from the federal unemployment account to allow partial reimbursements, generally 50% of the amount of payment in lieu of contribution. So essentially, the feds are going to pay half of that, of what's due for government entities and nonprofit organizations when that time starts. Again, we haven't hit that trigger yet. The ultimate question is, full disclosure, not a corona virus, not a COVID-19 expert. When does this end? Being around in 2008, 9, 10 with Iowa Workforce Development, there are some similarities in a lot of the guidance that has come out for unemployment insurance purposes. One of the things I think we have to keep an eye on is, will there be extensions to this stuff? That's what started to happen during the recession. I'm not suggesting this is a recession, just that the guidance is very similar for unemployment insurance purposes, which actually helped us because it allowed us to get things moving quicker because we already had a lot of this stuff in place. But so that's going to be the ultimate question. Right now, the $600 payments for you or those folks who may be giving it that are working for you, those are going to pay out until the end of July 25th. There's been no talk of an extension. As we get into July, I anticipate that will be a heavily debated conversation, and that will cause a lot of angst with some of our folks who are drawing unemployment, because you get used to that money, obviously. So that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. Those are a few months out, obviously. But in a real nutshell, that is kind of how it works on both the employer side and on the claimant side, which is those individuals who are drawing unemployment. I would suggest that by the end of this week, early part of next week, the bulk of people who are eligible for PUA who have filed, that is the pandemic unemployment assistance for those folks who don't qualify the normal way, will have started to receive their benefits. When that happens, then it starts to alleviate phone calls, which have been historic for us numbers-wise. That starts to free up a lot of other stuff, and it allows us to move through things a little quickly. We really had to get over this hurdle of April, mid-March to the end of April, to start to see a little bit of kind of balancing out. So, Stephanie, is there anything you'd like to add there? I don't mean to talk the whole time, so I'm sorry.
No, I think you covered all of the main points. The only thing that I would say too is the 50% that's going to be paid for reimbursable employers, that actually looks like from the guidance it's going to go through the end of December. So that has a little bit different date than that $600.
Yeah, good. Fair enough. That's a great point. So One of the things you get all this guidance from the Department of Labor, and then they kind of drop it on all the states, and in all of the states virtually have a different system they use. That's a whole nother webinar conference call that could be had for several weeks. But so they drop it on you, then you got to really scramble to put it together. So you're walking this fine line. You want to get it done as quickly as you can. You got people who want their money, understand all of that stuff. I've been in those scenarios. I get it, but you got to make sure you try to get it as accurately as you can, because this thing looming behind us is when we come in and get audited. All the states will, for how they're administering this. So it's hurry up and get stuff going, but then you got to make sure you're trying to do it as correctly as you can as well. So Dustin, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, or if you'd like to kind of go into questions. Really, that's kind of where we at with it. I think by the end of this week, each week we're getting to a place where we're better, and that we're getting more people paid. And that's really what our focus has been. How quickly can we get people going? I know there's been people who have filed and they got the denial letter. It's actually, the denial letter is a green sheet. Again, we call it that because it comes out on green paper. The reason it comes out on green paper is so people read it. We get a lot of people, I think, who throw a lot of stuff away, and it's just kind of a psychological thing. But that paper really is saying, hey, you don't qualify under normal circumstances. That's something that we're hoping we would have a new form that would be going out by the next kind of huge unemployment surge that we had. Unfortunately, we weren't in that position to have that. But so that basically says, hey, when you get those, or if you have people who haven't filed yet and they do, that doesn't mean they're disqualified. That just means that they won't qualify under normal circumstances. What happens then is we shift them into another bucket, and that's where they get thrown into that PUA bucket. I encourage everybody to go out to iowaworkforcedevelopment.gov, click on the COVID-19 tab. That tab will take you into a bunch of updated information. Most importantly, there'll be a PUA tab in there, and it really lays out what are required that we need from you. And that stuff's laid out by the Department of Labor. Remember, unemployment insurance is a real kind of interesting beast, because the states administer it, but 99.9% of all of our funding is federal. So we're kind of in this middle weird realm where we have the state and the feds, and we're trying to administer it all for everybody. So, but as guidance comes out, we're trying to put that on. I don't foresee any different guidance coming out now. I think where we are is where we are. The only changes would be is if they're extended. PUA goes till the end of this year, December 26th. So there's time to certainly draw out the 39 weeks. Above all, though, we hope to get people into work, and hopefully things are open up by then.
Yeah, and I just add a couple things, Ryan. I put a message in the chat box, so if anybody wants to ask a question, feel free. And we do have one from Michelle. But before I get to that, I mean, Ryan and Stephanie, what's kind of the volume that you're seeing, and are you seeing somewhat of a slowdown at this point?
Well, I'll go. So, I was, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess when I look at it, I was here during the 2008-9 time, and I took a lot of the calls then. And, we would have a busy day then. We'd take, on some of the busiest days, I think we were at 4,000 or 5,000 calls a day. I mean, we've had days here we've had 35,000 calls in one day. So we've eclipsed a lot of records, quote unquote, that I didn't think we'd ever see. It's slowing down now. I think the last 4 weeks have been record setting for not only Iowa, but all states. Yeah. What I noticed though, or what kind of you see is there's this huge initial surge when things happen like this happen, where people who aren't familiar with unemployment are going, they're dealing with a lot of things, and unemployment insurance is just one of them. And so it heightens stuff, and people want their money. And so understandably. And so once you can kind of get over that initial 3 to 4 weeks, then things start to kind of ease out a little bit. And I really, the $600 thing, that's a large amount of money, an extra amount of money. To put that in perspective, in 2008-9, we had something similar to that. I don't know if any of you guys recall that, or if you had anything to do with unemployment insurance, but it was $25 at that time. So, and that was every time you got your regular unemployment check, then you would get an extra $25. So, it is slowing down. The call volume, the bulk of the call volume are for people who've just filed, are in that kind of 2-week window where they're not sure if they're doing it right. They need to reset their PIN number. There's just a lot of basic unemployment insurance stuff, Dustin. So that's probably 85% of the stuff. Stephanie, I don't know if you have a different perspective on that. To answer your question, though, yeah, I think it is. We're starting to see it subside, and that's because people are getting paid.
I would agree with you, Ryan. I would only say the other thing is we have one other program that we're getting rolled out, and I think once we have everything out and paying, which will be in the next week or two, I think that's when we'll really start to see a slowdown.
Okay. Well, the question we got is from Michelle King, and she asked, I direct a nonprofit that engages only 1099 contract employees. Their nonprofit has never dealt with an unemployment claim before, but just received notice of a claim for one of our people. If they tick the box, I am not protesting the claim, does the nonprofit get charged, or are there other ramifications we should be aware of?
So Stephanie, and by the way, Stephanie's legal counsel for us, so it's easy for me to say, hey, Stephanie, what do you think about this answer, and be a chicken here. But so the best answer on this is, yeah, that's a great question, Michelle. And a normal one. So when somebody files a claim, you'll get that notice of claim. So there's 2 ways we send those out. One is paper, which is about 75,000 of our employers in this. Actually, I think it's about 74,000 of our employees. The only reason I know these stats, guys, is because I have to work and stuff every day. They receive the notice through the mail. The other way is through SIDES. So if you hear SIDES come up, SIDES is an electronic way of getting that notice. But that notice of claim will come out to you. You have 10 days to protest. I'm assuming this is because of a COVID-related issue, Michelle. I would suggest if you're not protesting it, you don't have to send that in, and don't worry about, okay, it is COVID-related, yeah. So there's no ramifications at this point because we haven't hit that $940 million in the trust fund. I don't know where we are exactly on that. Or how soon we are to that. Again, that's going to determine how long this kind of stays drawn out, where stuff is closed and people are continuing to draw unemployment. Remember, the more that people draw unemployment, the more that comes out of the unemployment trust fund. Now, all that federal stuff, the $600 extra, the employers don't have to worry about that. So take that amount as an employer and throw that out of your head. That has nothing to do with you guys. You're not charged for any of that, okay? But the amount of money right now, because we haven't hit that trigger mark. So to answer your question, the only way you would potentially be on the hook for it, for lack of a better term, would be if we get to a point where that trust fund lowers. At this point, I would suggest, since it's COVID related, your folks are eligible to file for unemployment. You're just kind of in a holding pattern until later notification. Steph, is there anything you want to add on that, please?
Okay, so I will add this. If you only have 1099 employees, you probably haven't reported wages that are in that 18-month period. You likely got the notice of claim because your employee had other wages and qualified for a regular state claim. So you got the notice of claim not because you were in our system, but because they might have reported you as their last employer. If you want to reach out to me, if you want to just send your email address, I can send you a quick email and I can maybe answer your question specifically about that employee. But if you are not protesting the claim and you do not have wages in their base period, then no, you wouldn't be charged at any point.
Yeah, that was going to be my question too, Stephanie. For this new PUA, my assumption would be is it doesn't act like the old regular system under covered wages. Is that correct? Or are people still, if it's a 1099 or a contract employee, are they still going to notify that the contractor for that quote unquote employee?
So under PUA, the self-employed 1099 employees, that type of thing, we don't notify the employer, is my understanding, and that's because the feds pay those wages. You would never be charged for those. In this situation, again, I think it's that hybrid situation where the person had both 1099 wages and actual wages or W-2 wages. And the problem, well, not the problem, but under PUA, the only way you get to PUA is if you don't have an eligible state claim. So that's why we have to go through that process. And part of that state claim is giving notice to all employers who have paid wages in the last 18 months and any employer identified as the last employer.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful, and what I kind of assume. I have a couple other questions for you guys that I've seen come up with a lot of other clients. If you have somebody who resigned and they don't want to come back to work, would they be eligible for any of your programs?
Stephanie, jump in here wherever. So depends on the situation. That's a good question. So if people are not wanting to come back and just because they want to try draw unemployment, then we want to be notified of that so we can set up a fact finding and ensure that they're not drawing unemployment when they shouldn't be, when there's work available by the employer. I think what we're still telling people is if the employee has a COVID-19 related kind of doctor's note, for lack of a better term, then they are eligible to not work. But under any other circumstances where the employer is asking the employee to work, then the employee is expected to be at work. One of the fears of the $600, I'm sure you guys can all imagine, is, hey, wait a minute, we may have some folks who are going to get paid more to not work than to work. And so trying to ensure that we are doing the best we can to help employers with that is certainly what we're trying to do. Stephanie, I don't know if there's anything else on that part of it. I think that's still kind of a sound simple, but it's really what we're trying to do.
And I think it's really challenging, and wouldn't want to put you guys on the spot, because I know that, we've been dealing a lot with nonprofits and for-profits with that question about people that don't want to come back and they feel, at risk because of COVID-19. How do you deal with that from an HR perspective is a real challenge outside of before you even get to, can they file an unemployment claim? We're seeing that across the board on a lot of clients. Thank you guys so much. That's been extremely helpful and appreciate giving some time to us.
Absolutely. We have about 120 seconds. People are going to be flying back here now for the next couple minutes, but we might have time for one quick question if you had one more, Dustin, while we've got Ryan on the line.
No, I don't know. Stephanie looked like she was going to talk. I don't know if you had anything else to add on that, to your point, as Ryan mentioned, I think people are going to see, especially people not making a high wage, folks making a decision that where they might want to stay home and make more money. But I don't know if Stephanie, if you were going to add something to that.
I was just going to put in a plug for our website. But if you go to our website, we have a banner up and on any of our COVID pages, I believe, that will link you to how to report if an employee is refusing or declining to come back to work.
Thank you for that, Stephanie. Thank you and Ryan again.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Dustin. Nice to see everybody. A lot of familiar faces there. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, Ryan. Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you, Dustin, for really being a resource to everybody who is looking to get these questions answered. I know it can range from really kind of high level stuff to the very tactical, what happens if I click this box kind of a thing. So that's great that we have experts who we can work with to help our nonprofits navigate this situation. So Bridget, I think if we have maybe one more slide just to kind of close out. I did want to welcome everybody back. We've got about 10 seconds before our rooms are going to officially close. So I hope that everybody has been having some really great conversations in the breakout rooms. I've been so interested to see just the recaps from our conversation leaders and just the value of the opportunity to share ideas and challenges. So as I welcome you all back, back to this main room and we close out our time together, I hope that you are inspired to maybe think a little bit differently about your marketing and some opportunities that you might have in this time. And I also wanted to share what we'll be talking about next week. So next week we'll have Courtney Duranda from TDT CPAs and Advisors doing our introductory presentation, and she'll be talking about financial scenario planning and what nonprofits can be doing to kind of figure out what's the best case, what's the worst case, and kind of what is the middle ground, and looking at, you know, how are you going to analyze your cash flow, especially in circumstances where, you know, you might be missing out on event revenue, or your programming might have shifted. So she'll really help us in the first 20 minutes next week to think about, you know, what is some work that you and your boards can be doing, some conversations that you can have around analyzing your finances. So I know that's a topic many have been really interested in. I wanted to make also a final plug that our nonprofit adaptation grant deadline for round 2 is this Friday. I've had a lot of good conversations and seen a lot of applications come through. So please shoot me an email if you want to set up some time, or the application itself is pretty straightforward. So thank you so much for being here today. We look forward to seeing you at our community circle next week, same time, same place. Until then, be well, and it's great to see you all. Have a good week. Bye.